It's Shootin the Bull, a podcast by Idaho Department of Fish and Game.
Listen, I knew he was a winner when he came to my crawfish boil, and everyone went home. All my other friends left, and then there was Tomothy scrubbing out coolers and scrubbing out a crawfish pot.
What a gentleman.
I was just scrounging up the leftovers. Really.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, tell us more about your annual crawdad boil.
Oh yeah, so I do two. I do one at work and then one at home. But essentially, for regional staff at work and for some of my friends and neighbors at home, I'll every year I fill out the permits with the hatchery folks over there, and then have about I think this year I do two batches of about close to. I think I did about 270 pounds of crawfish total this year.
Oh, jeez.
100, about 135 each.
Yeah.
And I've got 110 quart pot, 150,000 BTU jet boiler. That'll get your
that'll get them done
ready real quick. My mom's side of the family's from New Orleans, and so.
Do you crawfish or crayfish or crawdad?
We are crawfish. Solid crawfish.
Yeah.
Crawdads are what people that are trying to sound Southern say.
Mud bugs.
Yeah, I'll go mud bug. I'll split the difference.
Yeah. So today, joining us here at headquarters in Boise, we have a special topic that our Mr. David Bernasconi, regional wildlife biologist here in the Southwest region, brought to us. How to hunt like a wildlife biologist. And we're going to get into some of the nitty gritty of what that means. A lot of the questions that our wildlife biologists get asked, not just during hunting season, but leading up to it, more importantly. And Bernasconi's going to answer a lot of those. And also joining us today is Mr. Tom Talley, one of our engineers here at headquarters and also a dear friend. And Tom's going to provide some background into hunting failures and hunting successes.
Mostly failures.
We've had some shared failures.
Have you together?
I think so. We had a good, I think one season we went out for grouse all together, the three of us, and Ava, the wonder dog, was out with us. And, it's one of those places that was like up in northern 39 where, you think you're close and you are close, but you can suddenly not hear or see your partner. And before we knew it, we were all separated, and we had never beforehand discussed what our InReach numbers were or InReach addresses were. And so we couldn't contact each other either. And so it was a lot of playing Marco Polo in the woods together.
I got two questions for you. So when did you guys first meet? And then at what point in a friendship, because we're all kind of like in a weird triangle of friends here, at what point in the friendship is it presumptuous to share your InReach numbers with each other? Or to ask for your buddy's InReach number?
I think as soon as y'all are going out in the field alone together, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. If you want to call your shot and be like, oh, I'm going to smoke an elk this weekend. And the other guys are like, no, you're not. And be like, oh yeah, well, let's just exchange InReach numbers right now and I'll prove you wrong. And then that can happen too.
Have you guys smoked an elk together before?
We have not.
No, I think, was that the only time that we got out was for the dusky grouse up on, what's that, like Pilot Peak area?
Yeah, around that area. Yeah, no, we haven't done big game seasons together because I'm usually working the check stations during the season. And
he did check me at a check station though.
Was that a little uncomfortable or awkward?
Oh, he did a good job, I
got some tips from him.
Yeah, some tips, but he was this close from the David Bernasconi handshake of approval. Some hunters that come through, if they absolutely nail it, I will ask them if they want the handshake in the photo. I know sounds like a big ego for me. But
we're going to get into that.
I love it when people have everything nailed. And for me, that is, the tag on the largest portion of the animal and evidence of sex. And if they put that tag on that hind corner that has that evidence of sex attached, man, I just come over there. big old handshake, grip and grin, look at the camera.
It makes your job or whoever is at the check station a lot easier, right? Instead of digging through a pile of meat, and trying to figure out which one has the tag and the evidence of sex. And
we got a term called the meat wagon, and a meat wagon is when a bunch of hunters or a family come in and they have then taken all their meat and thrown it into like game bags or sometimes trash bags all together, and then suddenly you have to make sure that they have every single piece of meat that they're supposed to have and that they have enough tags for all the animal parts that are in front of you. And so you're going through, we had guys with buckets one time, buckets of meat, like Home Depot buckets. They're on ice, but still, and you're just elbow deep and
Family's meat bucket.
Family's meat bucket.
What was Tom checking in? A pine squirrel?
No. Yeah, he had a dandy little buck. It was a nice, mature buck. He was a good guy.
Yeah, it's a couple years old probably.
Yeah.
How'd you two meet?
BHA. It was making friends in your 30s is hard, especially when you move to a new town. And so you got to put in the work. And
I think was that right after COVID or was it before COVID?
It was like right after after everyone was starting to come out, like the little woodchuck, little what's his name again?
Oh, I don't know.
The guy who comes out of the ground, looks at the shadow.
Oh, Puxtawaney Phil.
Puxtawaney Phil, yeah, coming out like Puxtawaney Phil, and then we showed up at like a great BHA event, and just you're looking around, and there's a lot of guys who are super serious, a lot of dudes who are just like super buff, jacked, just really into hunting, and then I'm looking for my fellow,
and then us,
yeah, then I'm looking for like the fellow weirdos, like I want
misfits,
exactly, and so a few of us just immediately locked eyes and started
exchanging InReach numbers,
InReach numbers, and texting back and forth, and ever since then.
How long have you guys been with Idaho Fish and Game?
Tom?
I've been here, I think, a little over 3 years.
Okay, sweet.
What about you, Bernasconi?
Oh boy. Let's see. So I started off as a wolf technician in 2016, and that was my first even jaunt out west, really.
Is that hanging cameras?
Slinging cameras and then going into rendezvous sites rather, and to collect genetic material from essentially scraping turds, and for genetic material, as well as hanging cameras. But that was a lot of fun because you're out there howling, trying to find packs, and they're howling back. And when you can hear pups, you go in and. Yep.
So you're howling to them.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you could play a speaker, I guess, but it's just way easier and more portable just to howl yourself. Yeah.
Whoa, that's cool. Yeah. When did you? So after that was 2016, you said.
Yep.
What did your trajectory look like after that?
Let's see. I did some tech work in New Mexico, spelunking, looking at for the Forest Service, doing white nose disease in bats, as well as working in some unexpectedly having to work in recreation out there too, on some like pretty popular points of interest out there. And then after that, I picked up a master's degree at the University of Georgia, and I was working at the Savannah River Ecology Lab and partnered with the USDA Wildlife Services Rabies Management Program. And so what I ended up doing on that one was essentially they are doing a giant vaccination program for raccoon rabies on the East Coast, because raccoons are the primary host of rabies on the landscape out there. And so what they do is that they drop these oral rabies vaccination baits or ORVs, and they drop them in a wall pretty much from Maine all the way down to Alabama, and they're in the progress of marching that wall east until it gets to the coast, so they can snuff out rabies on the East Coast. And I don't know how their funding's been affected. I'm sure not great, but one of the things that they were finding is that as they got further east, especially like out of the Appalachians, the other critters were competing for these baits. And so one of those competitors was the noble opossum.
The Virginia opossum?
The Virginia opossum with an O, as the ones that start with a P are in Australia. But the thing was that, you started looking at the literature about like, okay, what do possums do on the East Coast or just in general? And there was a lot of question marks. So old David got brought in.
A lot of playing dead.
Yeah, exactly. Old David got brought in. I think I must have, captured and collared over 100 possums on that project, but also to look at spatial ecology, looked at, densities of both possums and raccoons on the landscape. So I ran, over 36,000 trap nights of box trapping for possums and raccoons across the Savannah River site, and then did some other fun, tropical disease ecology work with them too. And that was a lot of fun. Gave me a lot of appreciation for North America's only marsupial. And then after that, my lovely spouse, Kaya, said, I want to do my MBA. Pick a state you think you can get a job at. And so we came out, and by that time, I'd been crunching wildlife for a while and said, you know what, I'll take any natural resource job I can get. So I worked for the Pacific States Marine Fishery Commission and worked as a coded wire tag coordinator and using some of my coding skills over there for them. And then all of a sudden, over the COVID period, this huge, when I was in undergrad, finishing in 2014, everybody was promising, everyone's going to be retiring soon. And it turned out it wasn't for, another, 6 years before that actually happened. And that's what happened. This huge wave of retirement was happening. And old David was in town when a job listed for wildlife biologist position here in the region. And man, it's a 1 in a million job. And I'm so grateful to have it. And so I've been doing that since January of 2022.
Dang, man. You covered some ground.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah. I mean, before that,
possums, fisheries.
I've done birds in the mountains of Borneo. That was my first job out of college. That was a fun one.
Naturally.
Yep, like everyone does, and just sleeping in the jungle and like the cloud rainforests. And then I think, what was the one after that? Oh, bald eagles and Bachman sparrows in North Carolina. So I was flying around in planes, counting eggs and nests and trying to see how all the bald eagles were doing on the coast out there.
Whoa, so you were counting eggs from the airplane?
Yeah, it's a really terrible job. No, I mean, because you're flying in the early spring when there's so many thermal updrafts, and it's a small little fixed wing, and it's real hot in that plane. And so just imagine just flying around in a circle constantly, and then getting
relatively low elevations,
while looking through binoculars, and then getting hit with updrafts repeatedly. Yeah, so that was a hoot. Yep, no, yeah. So
that sounds terrible.
Jobs. Yeah. Can I give you a random possum fact?
I would love one.
I'm using comma possum, not straight possum, by the way. Very strict about that. So a while ago, when I moved to Idaho, I was kind of bummed because I was moving to a state where there weren't any opossums after I just spent the last couple of years chasing them. Well, they don't really chase them, or toddle. So toddling after them, I guess. But and lo and behold, we have a couple populations in Idaho, up in the Weiser Payette area, kind of up by the Moscow area, and I think kind of up by the Post Falls area. You'll see them every now and then on the borders.
Weird. Sure these aren't the Norway rats that Eagle is dealing with?
These are not Norway rats. Although they might eat Norway rats, though. I don't know. We might get a guard possum at the house.
That'd be good.
Yeah. Little doghouse for it.
I started digging into it. And so we have on our website, if you want to get into it, you can look up sightings of wildlife.
You can add to them too, right?
You can add to them if you want.
Turkey tracker.
Yeah,
but for possums.
Like that. Yeah. Well, if you just want to, know some, look at some of the registered sightings on there, and you want to contribute to it, you can on our website. And one of those things was I was looking through all the records of opossum sightings in Idaho. I've had some ranchers go I just hit the biggest rat you've ever seen. And I could see why if you're involved with opossums, I could see why you might say that. But the interesting thing is that the first record in there was from 1906.
Really?
So opossums aren't.
I noticed that you're going back and forth on them. What's the consensus here, David?
When I say possum,
it's apostrophe.
I'm putting
possum.
an apostrophe before.
Oh, you said comma earlier, and I was like, what? Comma? Is that some Latin thing?
I meant apostrophe. Thank you.
All right.
A tall comma, if you will. It was 1906. So I thought that opossums had showed up recently to Idaho. And it turns out that they've been out here for a while. And so I looked at that record and I went, well, maybe that's not right. So I chased it down and I went into the Smithsonian's accession records and found a scan of the journal of the guy who collected a male and female opossum from Salmon, Idaho.
Really?
From one of the drainages in Salmon, Idaho. and I don't think there are any more opossums there anymore. But
I don't know. They do have. They can have up to 3 litters per year. So
they can be pretty. What do they call prolific breeders?
Yeah.
Or they can at least take 3 cracks at it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can raise them out. So 1906, I said, holy cow! Someone was there in 1906. There, Idaho was, had, just kicked off its, gold rush stuff, and it wasn't super well developed at the time, and people were coming out from all over the place. What's going on there? So then I found a book of mammalogy that was written by a guy out in California in the 1930s. And so that, with, all sorts of interesting tidbits out there about what opossums were doing out there. And people were, bringing them out as part of the Dust Bowl, because people had creative ideas, about during the Dust Bowl of how we can feed more people. The other interesting thing, though, was people were doing fur farms at the time, because opossum fur is really high-end soft fur for a liner.
So they were more introduced than...
But at that point in 1906, those industries weren't around. So what was going on at the time, though, was a massive diaspora of Southerners coming out of the South.
Right.
And bringing with them the things that they love to hunt, the things that they love to eat. And so, opossums, are likely as much a part of the fabric of the history of Idaho, of all those people coming out from the South and settling in Idaho, as a lot of other people that have come to Idaho after the fact as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, to add to that story, I heard that one of my uncles growing up actually had a pet possum that lived under the house.
What?
Yeah.
Did you have a name for it?
Stinky.
Stinky. There was a guy who worked at the Savannah River Ecology Lab, Kurt. He would every spring go out, check the pouches of the females that were road killed, and would raise out the young. And he had one that just decided to stay, and that one's name was Pooh Bear. And Pooh Bear was a real OG. And he learned all sorts of stuff by just watching Pooh Bear.
Yeah.
Opossums are neat because, a possum can get hit with 4 times the lethal dose of rattlesnake venom that a Great Dane can take. And then he also learned watching that, though, that Pooh Bear was a prolific hunter of snakes in the yard. Huh. Like Pooh Bear would just be toddling around doing nothing like a little Roomba, and then he'd get on a snake and then would just go nuts, hammer it and suck it down like spaghetti.
Huh.
And so, potentially like opossums being, really adapted to picking up snakes.
Yeah, I always knew that they were more of an opportunist, but I didn't know.
Yeah, they would
actually hunt.
They are not the most cleverest critters. They are Roombas. They are the popcorn of the food chain, but they're cool. I love them.
And you probably know this, they do have a prehensile tail.
Yep.
But they don't use it to hang from. They use it for
they will use it to hold on to stuff when they're climbing along, but they're not going to see like the cartoon of an opossum
hanging in a tree,
hanging upside down. Yeah, no.
Tom, what about you, man? What kind of work do you do here at Fish and Game?
Here at Fish and Game, it's we do a little bit of small project design that focuses primarily on access. So
no project is too small, Tom.
Well, compared to things like the Nampa hatchery rebuild, I would call what I've been doing small. So think boat ramps, sportsman's access sites. We do a lot of support projects for our regional offices.
Bridges.
We do some bridges. I did a pedestrian bridge over at the Sand Creek WMA that had basically failed and was cutting off access to some of their waterfowl hunting grounds. So that turned out pretty well. I did a beaver holding facility for the Magic Valley Regional Office so that they can, transfer beavers from problem areas to better suitable habitat. And then when we're not doing design, we're doing usually some form of project management. Like I just mentioned, the Nampa hatchery is under construction right now, and that's a pretty big project that
just started phase 2.
Yeah, an engineering firm is helping us, but we kind of manage it on behalf of Fish and Game.
All right, let's jump into it. So the reason you guys are here today is you pitched this idea of what are some of the things that you're seeing out in the landscape as a biologist or as a call retrieval as Tom has filled in on a number of occasions. Tell us, what is it that you're looking for as a biologist, first of all? Like when you're out in the field, what it is that you do? And then how does it lend itself to when you're out in the field as a hunter?
Sure. Well, when I'm, I will say this, biologists are not better hunters than any other group. In fact, like a lot of folks don't end up filling their tags. But I do feel like biologists, when they're out there, they are thinking about what's around them differently. The way I try to put it into like a metaphor, or I guess a simile, is it's like, I'm lucky enough to be married into a multilingual family, and I don't know the languages, and I'm a really bad spouse because of that. But it's like sitting if you go out there and you don't have that background knowledge as much, it's like sitting in a room where people are speaking in a different language around you, and you're kind of picking up on context clues of what's going on around you and cause and effect of things going on. But like, you really don't know what's going on. But as you pick up those, the language of the landscape around you, you start to really understand what's going on around you, what the story is, what the conversation on the landscape is going on around you. And it really, I feel like it may not necessarily make you like an apex predator on the landscape, but it does make being out there way more enjoyable. And you start to learn about what is making you successful and what is making you fail.
So would you say that being a biologist, being a biologist doesn't necessarily make you a better hunter, but being a hunter might contribute to making you a better biologist? Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the time it's just because, as a wildlife biologist, I get out there in the field a lot, not as much as I'd like, but when you're hunting, it's a very intimate experience where you're watching the individual behaviors of each one of those critters on the landscape around you. And so you start to see things and notice things that you're not going to notice necessarily, from a helicopter, or that when you're out there spending the time doing like a necropsy in the field, you're just trying to get out there, get that animal open, figure out what killed it, and get back out. When you're hunting, you're sitting out there and you're sitting and you're just watching and learning the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's arguably one of the coolest parts about hunting, is you get to places and you have these experiences that you wouldn't necessarily have if you were just doing hiking on trails or out camping or whatever. It's like you're getting yourself into an environment where you kind of have to be in that environment and speak the language in order to be successful.
Yeah. And you don't even, like, I know a lot of folks that are really good, naturalists, or they really pick up on those patterns just because they're very observant, and they may not have a name for like the scientific name for a plant. They may not know, the specifics of a mule deer, like why it migrates, but they know exactly when they're going to come through, because their family's been there forever and they've been doing it forever, and they're really good at interpreting those behaviors on the landscape.
Yeah. Now, you're a wildlife biologist. Are you going to tell us where all the animals are today?
No. And in fact, one of the things I love talking to hunters when they call in, and I really love like learning about like what they're seeing in the field. And I really love when they have, really good informed questions. However, when I get a call from like a hunter, and I'm happy to take them, but like sometimes people don't think about the exchange of time that's happening. Like if I'm talking to somebody on the phone, that's a period of time where I'm not working on the species that they're interested in going out to see. Our sub-regional office in Nampa there, I mean, half the population of Idaho lives in the valley. So you can imagine the number of calls we might get. And it's not just hunter calls. It's, it's all sorts of fun stuff. Like there's a moose up in Hidden Springs that may or may not need to be moved somewhere else. Or a lady who lives on the Greenbelt and is asking for me to spay her mule deer doe that's behind her house.
Or a raccoon problem in Boise that's pilfering through crawdad remains in an alley behind David's house.
I do there is a family of raccoons that lives in an unkept house around the street from me. But I don't know if they've ever gotten into our trash before, though.
Do you ever get calls about like deer that have been hit by cars and have like, a wobbly leg or missing a leg or something like that?
That's a common one. And typically, those types of calls, they're hard because the thing is sometimes it depends who you are, but you may recognize yourself as one of these individuals. Sometimes you hear somebody come to you and to express some sort of thing that is making them upset, and what they want you to do is to listen to them and show them some level of understanding. And meanwhile, my instinct is like, how do I fix this right now, or does this need to be fixed or not? And often those conversations, it's just like that deer. In many instances, that deer is very uncomfortable. But over time, it will heal and it'll be fine. Or in other cases, it's it's sad stuff like talking through the facts of life in some of these instances and putting some of these sad things into giving people context for that. When there isn't necessarily a need to go out and do something with a specific animal like that. Yeah, we had, I don't know, Tom, if you ever saw it when you came over, but where I live up on the bench, kind of off of Chinden area, and we had a fawn last spring, last summer. And pretty soon on it developed, it had a broken leg, and then pretty soon the leg itself swelled up to about 4 times the size. It was horrible to watch because it couldn't walk on it, but it definitely got the attention of a lot of neighbors. People kept asking because they know I work for Fish and Game. They'd ask what can we call? Do we call animal services, whatever? And it's just no, you just got to let it do its thing. And lo and behold, this past spring, it was double the deer itself was double the size, and the leg was, limping on it, but it was kind of back down to its normal size. So it is shocking the injuries that I have seen that animals have both, gotten in a urban wildlife interface or just out in the woods. And then, I've encountered them again just because, they're a marked individual in the population and they are that they have recovered from. The other thing to keep in mind too with wildlife versus people is that when it comes to, and this is a wild one, when it comes to external flesh wounds, many animals heal way faster than humans do. So we have all these sweat glands and all over our skin that help us handle, endurance, running and being out in hot environments. Well, most animals don't really have that much vascularization in their skin. And when they get those big wounds, they may look gnarly, but they'll actually recover from them quite quickly. They're tougher than we are. We've seen that too here at the Nature Center. We had 2 fawns that I think at the time the manager down there said that they were bobcat attacks, but a little side on their hips were completely rubbed off and open and festering. And again, you probably knew it was going to survive, but it was gross and hard to look at. And lo and behold, again, next year, there's a little bit of, you can tell a little bit of the shading on the hair, but the deer's thriving. They're yearlings now and thriving. Yep. So that does happen. So walk us through, David, when you're going to go out, and depending on the time of year, because I think seasonality is an important part here to talk about, because obviously when we're talking about hunting, we're thinking about the seasons and thinking about where animals are going to be. We've been out, this is kind of when hunters start to go out and start scouting. We're recording this in July, by the way. But when we go out in July and August, we were just talking about it off air. It doesn't necessarily mean that the animals are going to be there in September during archery or October, November, and later. So when you go out, first of all, kind of walk us through when you're, as a biologist, when your biologist hat on, when are you starting to kind of go out and monitor? Are you monitoring year round? But when do those seasonal changes start? Sure. Yeah. So, the interesting thing is, a lot of those seasonal changes, really the big one that'll happen is, and they can happen depending on where you are in different order, but that first big frost event, and also the first day of a season in which the category and species of animal that you're going to pursue is open for season, because those are the first two ones that'll happen. A lot. For instance, I look at a lot of the mule deer population all the mule deer population in 39.
Yeah.
And the way I tell hunters is for 39 is that you kind of have two routes to success because looking at those events.
And just to clarify, that's because that's literally your job. It's not like you prefer 39 over, 32A or anything like that. As a hunter, you're looking at 39 because literally that is where you work.
That is where I work and where I hunt. I'm a ride or die 39er. I don't know. I can get into that a little bit later.
39 gets a lot of flack, man.
I care immensely for that unit, and I think about it a lot and work on it a lot.
It's a big unit. It's got lots of varying terrain, lots of opportunity. Looking at the numbers,
Yeah, sagebrush steppe all the way up to 8,000 feet towards the back as you get back in there, snow-capped peaks.
The edge of the sawtooths,
Yep.
And I think it's good to preface here too. I mean, obviously, like we have listeners that are statewide and also out of state that hunt in different parts of the state. We're talking about one unit specifically, but a lot of the stuff you're going to talk about today would you say is universal across the state? I mean, assuming we're not in the super dense panhandle, deep dark woods.
I think for the most part, a lot of the stuff is universal. I mean, however, it can change based on, if it is different, I'll try and get into it a little bit. But looking at the scale in which you're hunting is important, and that's where you start to see those big differences. For example, when you're out looking at an individual deer and you're making your kind of mental model of that individual deer. Well, that's when you're looking at kind of like what they call a resource selection model, or what trying to model what animals what they prefer, where they prefer to be on the landscape. You might refer to that as like a first level of selection. That individual, you're building that mental model for the day in your head of that one critter and where they're going and why they're going there.
And are you kind of getting in that mindset when you're yourself going out hunting? Like, okay, well, this is, let's say you're going out early season, you've got a controlled hunt, archery mule deer tag. Where you're gonna and how you're gonna hunt that animal in the late fall during the rut is totally different than where you're gonna go look for them early season. So are you playing this in your biologist mind of
the difference of it, and kind of we were talking earlier about vocabulary is that I just have the vocabulary for it. You guys are doing it. You just don't know that you're doing it.
Right.
So you're out there watching that one individual, the day of while you're out on that hunt, trying to figure out what they're going to do and where you need to be to intercept them on the landscape. But then also, as part of the planning process, you're looking at that population, that second level that you could look at of that. What does this population do depending on the timing of the year?
Right.
And kind of like we were talking about a little bit earlier when it comes to timing, so for most of those animals that, like, especially let's say mule deer specifically, and elk it's different, but for mule deer specifically, if you're out in July and you are finding mule deer, like a nice buck out there in the landscape, odds are that buck will be within 2 miles of that area when you come back for roughly like the first 10 days of that hunting season.
Okay, so that time of year,
unless a big, like, huge, like weather event changes things,
or pressure somehow, or something, but they pretty much settle into like a little home zone for that part of the year.
That kind of home range, their summer home range, and then when you get higher than like that local population, you're looking at the species as a whole. What and when we're talking about like universalities of mule deer, we're talking about mule deer as a whole, that upper level. So those are all things that we're all thinking about. I'm just kind of thinking about them and then putting the name to it while I'm out in the field.
Do you ever get to a place, because I think this happens to Connor and I a lot, you get into a new area and you just think to yourself, man, this should just be chock full of game, and you don't see a single thing.
Yep.
like as a biologist, what are you thinking then? You're seeing water, you're seeing cover, you're seeing food. I mean, it just boggles our minds. But how do you talk yourself through that?
So, some of the things I'll think about are, I'll look around and go like, all right, for instance, last year was a great example of this. I'm out hunting in like the central part of the unit, and it is dry as a bone. It was way dry last summer, and we've had a lot of dry summers, but that one was really dry. And this place that normally was piled with elk every year, like half a mile from the road, with just nothing to be found, just because they didn't have anything to eat. And so they were all hanging out much higher on the landscape than I was at. And then sure enough, by the end of the season, as we got a little bit more precip and things cooled off a little bit, they started to mosey their way back down a little bit. But the other things that I think about, you got those basic needs that all wildlife and people need, is that food, water, shelter, at some point in the year, breeding, and then that, was it 1, 2, 3? What's the other one? Anyway, the last one is not getting shot in the face. And that's a really important one. So go ahead.
I was going to say, before you do this, can you, in broad strokes, kind of lay out what a year in the life of a mule deer or an elk is like? Because we talked about earlier offline where, deer start high and they have like their winter ranges and they have their summer ranges. And then they kind of cycle through those every single year based on those 5 needs. Can you kind of quickly just kind of go through like what a year for a deer or an elk looks like?
Sure. I mean, we've been talking about mule deer, just kind of go on with that.
Make sure your mic's pointed at your mouth there,
sorry.
David.
Sorry, I'm just slinging it off to the side. I'm all over the place with this thing. My job kind of, in some ways, mirrors those critters in the field a bit. So, like if we just start, let's start with the calendar year. It's January. They are, pretty solidly on winter range at that point. And unless we get some really big systems, they're about as winter range as they're going to be. And at that point, myself and other biologists are hanging out the side of helicopters, and we are we got a gunner and a Bernasconi in the back who, after that deer gets secured with a net, I'm out there, putting a hobble on it, fixing it with a collar, taking samples if we're taking samples, putting ear tags in it and cutting it loose. And at that point, what we are collaring are the previous the fawns that were born in the previous June. And so we are looking at the survival of those fawns on the landscape as they're going to make it from June all the way into out of the winter. We like to call it the end of May, pretty much. And at that point, all through the winter, they are just trying to break even. They are working on a razor edge margin. They don't have a whole lot of mistakes that they can make because all the fat and reserves on them that they show up with is what they've really got on them for the rest of the season. Eventually, we get that green up, and there's about 2 weeks or so as their stomach biota is flipping over. And at that point, they are getting absolutely no nutrition from what they are feeding on the landscape. And at that point, too, though, deer will actually be feeding on even cheatgrass out there. And until cheatgrass gets to be about 2 or 3 inches tall, that there's good nutrition that mule deer can get out of it, but that only really lasts for sometimes 3 days. And that's the only amount of time that they'll be hitting that cheatgrass for.
Yeah, you were saying something that it's like winter weekends and spring kills.
Exactly. So that, you could have an animal that makes it all the way through, and then they get to a point where, suddenly they're going really calorie negative in the spring, and they are just keeling over left and right.
And even that extra energy that it takes from digesting the green up can kind of tip them over the edge.
Exactly. So, and then so after it starts to green up and their biota is really switching over and they're starting to go calorie positive. At that point, those, the fawns, does, and bucks, they're on their way back. They're I think what the Monteith Lab is saying, they're surfing the green wave all the way back in. And really, they are feeding their whole way along there until they all get to their kind of preferential summer ranges. And summer range is interesting because, you know, what they are looking for is somewhere where they're going to have green growth and new tasty green growth for as long as they can have it and keep on putting on weight. And that tends to be at those higher elevation places where they tend to be a little bit more moist, a little bit more cool, but also have that greenery. It's kind of why aspen is such a critical summer range plant type on or habitat for fawning does, and a lot of those times that's, you know, as time June rolls around, those does are dropping their fawns.
Yeah.
Provides great cover for that. And really, at that period of time, a lot of mule deer are trying to key in on those things that are like herbaceous, squishy green growth, the non-woody stuff out there. And really, they're in those places, those high up, you know, wet or wetter places with cover until we get to our first frost period. And a lot of that herbaceous growth dies. And at that point, you're seeing more nutrition start to shift over to your woody vegetation on the landscape. And so the mule deers are out there also eating in a way and subconsciously to shift their own gut biota to then start getting good at eating the things that are on woody vegetation instead. So
is this gut biota changing twice in a year?
It's changing throughout the year as they're, you know, swapping from food type to food type throughout the year.
Yeah.
It's pretty remarkable. You know, elk, they're way more generalist when it comes to what they're eating out there. They're lawnmowers out there, but really, those mule deer are going through and selectively finding, you know, things to eat that have exactly what they need at that time. And like, if you watch like mule deer out there on summer range through like a spotting scope, they're not just eating everything out there. They're looking at one flower and picking that off, and they're going through and nose through a bunch of other until they find the other one and grab it off there. And at that point too, you know, you have so those. Our does have dropped their fawns. Our fawns from the previous year are kind of hanging out with mom or just in the area of those younger other age class, bucks and does that were fawns the previous year.
Yeah.
But our bucks are still are further away and kind of have their. Sometimes it feels like it's like the Grinch who stole Christmas. You know, they're you know
They're in their bachelor zones.
They're up on Mount Crumpet up there. They're trying to cut a living in a place that's going to be as safe as possible and where they can put on as much weight before going into the rut as possible. And really, they're hanging out in a spot that's going to be about roughly 2 square miles that they've cut a living in. And when I look at that collar data of bucks that we've had out in the past, I mean they're really just taking their time, and they're on a set of 1 or 2 peaks, and they're just making their laps for the day. And then they come back and settle in a place that they know that if anything tries to sneak up on them, they're going to know it's there before the predator knows that they're there. And so that's why I was saying earlier, finding those bucks early can really pay dividends. Put together your little assassin's dossier. Follow those bucks, what do they do? When do they do it? Because, you can really be a successful hunter that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess one of the best ways of learning that is just to get out, right?
Yep. 100%.
Learn on the landscape that you are going to hunt in.
Exactly. And that's where I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage sometimes because, after we collared those fawns early in the winter, I spend the most amount of my time in the field in the late winter, early spring as I'm going out and doing these CSI necropsies, trying to figure out what killed these fawns on the landscape. And as we get more into the summer, I'm actually, that's oddly enough for me a quieter time, except this year is a little bit busier. Mm. And so folks who are out recreating a lot, getting out there, getting to see the stuff. If you put in the time, you can really be effective, especially if you start, in that July frame over the summer.
Yeah.
Kind of moving on though, in that kind of time scale of mule deer, you're, as we're getting closer to that hunting season, you're still seeing that same kind of stratification of bucks and does yearlings, and their young of the year fawns on the landscape. But once we get that frost that comes through, things kind of shift around. The does and younger mule deer and will start to get shuffling along on the migration sometimes. And for us around here, that roughly happens around mid-October. But those bucks are really wanting to hold on for as long as they can. And then especially once hunters start showing up in the woods, you don't live very long as a mule deer buck in 39 by not being very wily and reading the signs around you. And they become ninjas in the woods. They are, but at the time that hunter's out, like what are, deer gunning for? They're gunning for that nice mosaic of landscape. Those bucks, those older bucks are looking for places where they can cut a living and that has nearby forage, but also really good cover. Especially where there's a lot of pressure, they'll be spending more time in those timbered areas. Trying to hide as much as possible, being very sensitive to disturbance.
I guess until their instincts kick in and get them moving, right?
Well, until they get moved. Well, honestly, man, they even in December, I am still waiting for some of our mule deer bucks to come down.
Wow,
they are so wily. They'll try and breed the does that are kind of lagging behind in the back. They are waiting to come down to that winter range front until they are forced to be there.
Well, it's funny. I always hear from the public that everyone feels like the elk rut is getting later and later every year, and I don't know if that's actually true or not. But do you see any truth or evidence that maybe that happens with mule deer as well, with any kind of potential climate change or anything like that? Sure.
I mean, even especially when those things are so climate driven. If we don't get like a big snow event that's going to kick off in the middle of the hunting season, then they don't want to go down very far. They, for instance, a lot of my late season archery hunters that are out there, the ones that are becoming more and more successful are hunting further back up the migration route than you would think they would need to be at that time period. But if we get a heavy winter, an early heavy winter, things get pushed down real fast. So a great example of that was that snowpocalypse year, that winter of 2016, 2017, that 2016 hunting season. I mean, we started to get snow early that year in Idaho, and bucks were really pushed down earlier, and were harvested in pretty big numbers that season going into that winter.
It's probably a good opportunity to point out that you're talking about different populations, different herds. Not every herd has the same behavior in different units. You'd mentioned the sawtooth herd. Can't remember if we were talking about sawtooth mule deer or sawtooth elk, but that herd differing from the Boise River zone and then the Smoky Boise area. Can you kind of explain why there's differences between herds? Like some herds will stay up on the summer range for a lot longer, as some other herds will drop down into winter range way sooner,
Sure.
Yeah, sure. This might also, I was going to ask a question that kind of ties into this, that, we have all of these units and zones, but I don't know that anyone or everyone knows how those zones are really developed, what that, unit is based on. So maybe that ties to Connor's question as well.
Sure, yeah. So when it comes to at least how, that's a good question.
Which one, mine or Tom's?
Whose is better? Tell us right now.
So, like, Tom's is a tough question because there's not necessarily.
That's what I'm here for, the hard ones.
These zones are, at least zones for elk, are set up because they are as close as we can get to balance the management of trying to fit all of like a population under a single management umbrella of a geographic area, while also balancing the
objectives,
the objectives and realities on the landscape.
So you're taking into account their migration patterns herd numbers, amount of food, forage, all that on the landscape, right? All those play into each one of those little areas.
Yeah, as well as like the behaviors of those animals in those groups, are, and as well as, let's see, there's also some things that are like, in some cases, I mean, I hate to say it, but like they're when you have as established as an organization that Fish and Game is after our 125th anniversary, sometimes, the minutia of why each one of these zones was set up and how those objectives were set, they were set very thoughtfully. But sometimes there are parts of those objectives or the boundaries of those zones that, were unique at that time period.
Right.
To those people in the room.
And the animals at that time period,
Yep.
That's not a static thing across 125 years.
Sure.
Patterns change.
Sure, exactly.
And landscapes burn,
Yep. And Oregon, I believe, is changing the way they have a lot of their stuff set up over there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll have to double check that one. But I'm pretty sure that's what I was seeing the other day. But when it comes to like the differences in the populations, though, and how they behave differently in different areas, like 39, for instance, is part of the larger Smoky Boise mule deer managed population, and that runs from Unit 39, which is the west side of it's all the way on Highway 55 in Idaho, all the way over to Unit 50, which is kind of over by Haley and kind of
Wood River Valley area.
Yeah, exactly. Which is quite a large area, but these animals share similar migration patterns, and they share genetics, all sorts of stuff. Now the trick is, though, when you look at different populations, though, like a good example of this is like a mule deer in the Owyhees, south of across the Snake River, south of 39, and you look at mule deer in 39. There's a big difference in how they migrate. So the mule deer in 39, they do a very big kind of roughly northeast to southwest migration when that period of migration kicks off, and they're paralleling those major drainage corridors, some like within about a mile or two, following them along as they get all the way down to the Boise front and Danskin front.
So generally coming down in elevation
over time,
and following the river,
and making a big directional movement from northeast to southwest there, roughly. In the Owyhees, it's a little bit more of a situation where you have like kind of like this big mountain system in the middle, and the mule deer are just going up and down slope to find that good elevation of where they need to be. And it's not necessarily they're following the canyons and the Owyhee somewhere or something like that. They're
but more of a radial pattern, maybe from the high elevation.
Yep, from more of a central hub and up and down out. Yeah. Yep, exactly. And so depending on where you are, you can be looking at a completely different system. So that's one of those good questions that I think to ask if you're really curious and you want to ask an informed question, asking, if you're calling a biologist, not asking where do I need to be hunting, but can you help me understand the system of what's going on with this group of mule deer here?
Their behavior at this time in this unit.
Sure. And that can be, that gets into more biologist territory, right? Mm-hmm. What we don't like is when we start to get into hunting guide territory.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't like the hot spot places. Yeah. Don't like to necessarily like the more I'm in my biologist realm, the happier I am, kind of deal.
And you think that's too? I mean, like you think hunters call in sometimes, not all hunters, but some hunters call in with just expecting an easy answer, expecting that hunter guide kind of point me here, tell me where to go. Which canyon are you seeing them in?
I encountered the most extreme example of this recently.
And it was from me.
It was not. It was not from. Never from Tomothy.
You just described, concealed your voice.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cut to a reenactment and a silhouette of Tom. Yeah, no. What it was a gentleman called me on the phone, and said, I don't want to get very far from my car, but I want to shoot an elk. And I can't get very far from my car for various reasons. And I said, well, all right, I'll give you a hand. Here's some areas where at least you can get back, and gave him a whole rundown. Spent 45 minutes with him on the phone. About 2 weeks later, I get one of the awesome front desk staff at our office comes by. He's like, oh, there's a guy who says he talked, or whose friend said he talked to you, and you helped him, and he was hoping to get help too. I get up front. It wasn't the friend. It was the same guy. And he wanted the exact same spiel again.
Yeah.
Like he hadn't even heard anything I said before. And then he stops me and goes, wait. This is, you're giving me too much information. Can you write this all down for me?
Yeah, draw me a map.
And at that point, it was one of the.
You got any Onyx pins?
Yeah,
you can send me.
And at that point, I just very kindly slid a notepad across to him. That was one of those interactions where it was I was yeah.
Well, you were trying to be of service by helping him out with access, right? Showing some
Absolutely.
places where there should be some animals at that time of year in that general region that is also accessible by vehicle. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you try to do your best, but man, sometimes people don't show up with their best.
Well, and I think that plays into something that, Connor and I have talked about a little bit too, that people tend to get too wrapped up in this end goal of
Yes.
hunting, right? Like if they come out of the season empty-handed, it was a waste of time and they're defeated. But really, if you're not enjoying the whole process of being out there and learning and watching animals on the landscape, you're kind of missing the point, missing the forest through the trees or whatever that saying is.
We always end up debating this every single time we're around a fire.
Yeah.
Every single time. Because I get your perspective on it, but I think too there's a level of pressure from like social pressure.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There's a level of whether you're
on the table.
putting meat on the table.
Yeah. And I get all that.
Yeah. But you and I had talked about on the phone, David, was being a better hunter and being a better biologist. It comes from a lot of failures.
Yes.
Because as much as we like to think about harvesting something every single year or even every other year, the likelihood, 20% of people harvest a year for elk, and maybe close to that for mule deer, slightly more, slightly less, depending on the unit. Those aren't really great odds. If you're looking at one out of every five people, or one out of every 5 years, maybe for an individual hunter. So there's a lot of failures in that, depending on how you want to look at failure.
Oh, yeah.
It might be a blown stock, but how do you get to become a better hunter through that, getting past those failures? So
one of the best pieces of advice I got from my high school biology teacher at the Alabama School of Math and Science, shout out to Barry McPhail. He said that, the difference between a scientist in the field and a hiker in the woods is a notebook. And so really taking stock of what you're seeing, what you're doing, and what the results of those things are. And that really helps you fail forward. Most of us spend the majority of our time in the woods, not successfully hunting animal or not successfully harvesting animals every day. And it's that pursuit and the knowledge that you're getting out of it. But it doesn't really help as much if you're not retaining that knowledge. Mm-hmm. So one of those things that I'll do sometimes is that, like, if I'm at the end of the day and I'm like making a mountain house, or if I'm just watching stuff in a spotting scope, sometimes I've got like my little Write in the Rain notebook. And if I notice something or have a thought or whatever, I'll take a quick jot down of like the date, the time, the name of the waypoint. And
yeah, you might start to see patterns over several years of maybe you're out camping and you're starting to see deer or elk at a certain elevation or direction of slope on the mountainside. Yeah. And after, making notes of those, you start to say, oh, well, this part of summer, I'm likely to see them here, Yeah. You start painting a better picture for yourself.
Absolutely.
But yeah, to your point of failing forward, I get asked a lot, what's your strategy, when you go out? And a lot of times I just tell people my whole strategy is process of elimination, because I've gone out more often than not and just had total failures, seen nothing.
I think you're one of the most active outdoors people that I know Like, because like most people will be, be hem and hawing, making a big deal about going out, but most of the time you're just out already by the time people are done packing their stuff. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I loved about Tom was I took him out on a mortality in the sawtooths one time. I think it was an elk calf mortality, and we get out, we get in the truck, and one of the things I look for is who's going to be, if they're not in a field biologist background, how I'm going to tell they're going to be a helpful or not as helpful is,
So you start with the engineers.
yeah. Well,
Also a process of elimination.
First one is like, do they have a level of grit? That's important. Like, are they going to crap out on me because they're, something's rubbing or they're uncomfortable?
And there's usually not a trail to get into these morts.
No, you're swimming through buckbrush and, going up, scrabbling up sliding slopes, and inevitably you'll get somewhere where a predator has killed something and is sometimes hanging out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
that was one of the first things that I went out with you on was that mort signal. You showed me how to use the telemetry equipment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cute.
Yeah,
it was like that scene in Ghost.
Yeah,
the pottery. Where
had his hands wrapped around me, and we were both holding
the antenna towards the collar. But the other thing is like how conscientious is that person? How quick are they to make an assumption and run on that assumption before they really stop and think about something? Some of like the most, the things where people miss the most is they go, oh, I know what's going on, and they just keep on. They just go, and before they know it, they didn't really take time to think about what they should have packed or what they were going to expect to see when they get there, or what may have caused something else to happen. And Tom's really good at that. And he's got a lot of grit, and he's a really good hiker. He's way faster than I am. So I really appreciate that. He was waiting at the carcass and I was huffing and puffing my way up the hill behind him.
I think I just got lucky on my route. So
I would say, yeah, Tom faster than us. I don't know about that. Because you guys, you and Kyle are always talking about our long legs, hopping over buckbrush and stuff. And we have the advantage, but Tom he scoots.
Scoots and flies.
So I was in a trapper ed class once, and the trapper that was given the presentation, I think explained, Tom kind of talked about the picture, painting the picture, but he explained like what the mosaic of the landscape is when you're out trapping. And I think it applies obviously to hunting as well, but when you're out hunting and you're out trapping or whatever, you might see tracks, you might see a kill site, you might see little tufts of hair not affiliated with a kill site, just like, little shreds of mule deer hair or whatever. And those all kind of, I think, add up to like a clue, or kind of add up. They tell a story. And I think that was the metaphor he uses. Like you're looking at it when you're out there in the landscape, they're telling a story. And you, as a trapper, you use that to your advantage. But I think it also applies to hunting too, where, you're by that process of elimination, we might be spending, 20 hours a week on Onyx or whatever, looking at maps all day long, being like, this is the place I'm going to go hit first thing this weekend. And then you go there, you immediately go up this, this finger ridge, and you get 2 miles in, you haven't seen crap. But you might have seen these little clues, and those, I think, add up to kind of what you're talking about, where you can kind of start to fill in these pictures based on the landscape and start to kind of get a picture of where the animals might be or where they might not be.
Absolutely. And another thing with that too is, it's you kind of get this homing beacon sense after a while, where you start to see the things get, they're playing the hotter, colder game or warmer, colder game. And you're out there going up the hill, and you start to see that good habitat, that good, that mix of cover types out there, forage types, good like ecotones, transitional like types of one ecosystem to another, or one habitat type to another, and then suddenly you start to see things that are like have been nibbled off, or then you start to see poop, and then that poop's pretty dry, but then you start to find the stuff that is like, oh, that's fresh, and that's not just been rained on. It's like it is steaming, and then like you're like, I'm hot. Mm-hmm. And then, but the important thing is, as you're going up those like that scale, it's like, what is around you? like look around you because and really get to know the place where you're at. Sometimes like I've hunted a lot of my places, like I'll spend a day at the same places every year because I want to know what's different that year and what has changed with the animals there for that specific year. And then I'll look at, what's happened with the weather before that and why might they be doing what they're doing or they're not there.
So you're thinking like a scientist. You're kind of formulating your own little hypothesis, if you will, and then trying to, prove or disprove that.
Sure. Well, I mean, it starts before that with those observations. So, like, you're going around as a scientist, and you make an observation, and then you say, well, why are they doing that, or where will they be, and then you just play that out for the day. You look at what are the covariates around you, what are the moving parts, and then what is the end result for the day. And the end result isn't necessarily you shooting that animal. The end result could be, these mule deer are down in this patch below me right now. The wind from the river is coming in from, this direction. The predominant wind's coming in from that direction. And we have this aspect. I think they're going to be here by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And did they get there or not? Mm-hmm. And why or why not did they get there? Can be really important. That's like a good example. Another thing are just like the other covariates that you're looking for on the landscape. And like I said earlier, not getting shot in the face is a big one. And I'm serious about that because you can be in a place where you are, like I find a lot of my animals less than a half mile from the road. And if you hunt 39, the thing that I'm keying into is that, that, for example, the not getting shot in the face part is that you can find those things that provide that same level of calmness in terms of people presence. You can find that a half mile from the road, or you can go all the way back into the Sawtooth Wilderness to the drainage that no one ever looks in. Yeah. Or if you're in the front country, you're looking for the drainage that, everyone goes past. Yep. It's, 1,200 to 2,000 feet of elevation gain over a half mile, which is quite a bit. And you cannot view into that drainage from a distance away that is easily accessible, and the only way to know what's in there is you getting up there and finding out on your own. Yeah, those types of places will usually hold animals because most hunters aren't willing to go there. Right. Or the approach that you take to get there in the first place is important too, because if you're taking the approach that no other hunter takes, if there's a long, super easy ridge that everyone walks up and the deer goes, well, it's October 10th, so I'm just going to watch that ridge now. And lo and behold, that dude out there. And
what's all that orange for?
Yeah, what's all that? I mean, that's fun. Yeah. It's a fun choice of color.
But those ridges too, because when we're out hiking or shed hunting or whatever, you see cigarette butts and beer cans and spent shells and spent, rifle casings and stuff. And that those ridges get pounded.
Yep. All the time. And the places that those ridge lines that you can view from too are similarly going to likely be empty as well.
You remember last fall, 2 falls ago, during my bachelor party, and we were bear hunting. We went up that ridge and we found not only a camo t-shirt on this one ridge, but a camo Under Armour hat in pink.
In Ethan's size.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, and covered in ticks.
I think the worst thing I found at one of those places was just someone left their underwear behind. I'm like, that had to be a bad day.
Yeah.
It happens to everyone.
You talk about wanting to know the story on the landscape. What happened on that day, man?
Or maybe not wanting to know.
Yeah. David, what are some? I like that you talk about having the right vocabulary as a biologist, and I think a lot of us at Fish and Game who aren't biologists. I know I do because I'm in the comms bureau, but I don't. It's a challenge to even learn the vocabulary even at Fish and Game. What are some ways, and what are some either phrases or concepts, probably better, that a hunter can pick up that will help them understand what they should be looking for out on the landscape, but also maybe if they are looking for answers and calling a biologist, they could kind of meet you more in the middle as opposed to coming in and not having that background.
Sure. Yeah. So doing as much reading. So the way to build that vocabulary, I would say first is the same way that I had to do it when I started grad school or being in school, which was, you have this topic that you're interested in. And so suddenly you have to build out this whole, like, your own personal library about that topic. And you just start reading as voraciously as possible. But you really don't know a lot of the big words, the big words that are in there. And like, and I'm, but that's the point that's the point of friction. That's the most important, because once you like go through that and go like, well, I'm just going to highlight all these things where I don't know what's going on. And then you just get to searching. Yeah. And then suddenly you have that whole picture made for you of that paper. And if you start chasing, like, if you start getting to like scholar.google.com, can't recommend it enough. If you're like, that's a place to search right there. Right. And a lot of people know about it. Some people don't. But if you're looking for the primary literature, the papers that are coming out that the wildlife biologists are writing and they're not being summarized by some magazine, then that's the place to go. And the way I would typically tear through that stuff is, you read the abstract, the summary, I'll read the intro. If I'm interested in the methods, I'll read them. If not, and then I'll jump right to the results in the discussion. And that makes it a lot faster to go through. Yeah. And you just move on. Now, in terms of the words like that are really helpful to get going, I think that hunters more than ever are more educated than they have ever been, to a point that's actually getting scary for me as someone who is managing populations of the landscape. I am not kidding. Some of the conversations that I've had with some of my more educated hunters, I am learning things. I mean, I always learn something from every hunter that I talk to, but from like a biology and movement ecology standpoint or nutrition standpoint, I start learning things from some of my hunters. And also in terms of the data that they are leveraging out there, is making them more and more successful. But when it comes to looking at like some of those words, like the reason I was talking about people being more educated than ever is that y'all may already know some of these words. So like when you're looking at resource selection model, what you can end up with there, if you're looking for resource selection models or habitat selection models, there's different words for them. And as you start to learn more and more about movement ecology, that's like tends to be the field, or spatial ecology. Mm-hmm. That's a great kind of, like, if you just did like mule deer spatial ecology in Google Scholar, you'd start to find really great papers on where mule deer are, and
why they do what they do,
why they may or may not be there, and when they're doing it. Migration routes, migration corridors that fall under that spatial ecology framework. Similarly, crossing over with kind of ag, you want to look at things related to like forage quality, phenology. Phenology is one of those ones that, especially when it comes to plants or wild or animals, is like related to like, the life cycle and the timing of an individual. So if you're looking at, the phenology of mule deer forage, that's going to get you, the peak periods, of nutrition that mule deer are timing on the landscape to eat, and when they're eating it, and what system they're in. But when you're doing these searches, it's really important to know that you're trying to narrow it down to the same system that you're going to be hunting.
Yeah. I'm curious what you think of this, Tom, because as relatively newer hunters in the last 10 years, when you start off hunting, there's endless resources out there. And when I mean by resources, I mean like, media channels, YouTube videos, especially, podcasts, different brands that are trying to get you to buy their rifles or use certain calibers and articles and stuff. It's abound. But I feel like there isn't a whole lot of is the science of why and where to look. And that's kind of a limiting factor for newer hunters, or even hunters that have been hunting for 30 years, that they might go to the same area to hunt mule deer or elk for the last 20 or 30 years, but they might not be able to point out a single tree species that they're hunting under, and
that's a good point.
I feel like there's a level of woodsmanship that is what you're talking about, or it's knowing the landscape, knowing what different things to look for, as opposed to, what rifle am I going to buy this year, and what am I going to upgrade to a 270 or a 6.5 Creedmoor this year, and thinking about that stuff the entire summer or leading into fall, instead of learning the different types of grasses that are out there, learning the different types of trees that are out there. Why are aspens important?
Because of the way it is.
Yeah. There's no money in learning trees.
Oh, man. Are you kidding me? Timber, getting into the forestry, there's tons of money there.
I will say that in my own experience, I've found that I start to wonder and learn more about those things, as I've hunted for several years. When I first started going out and I didn't know what I didn't know, I wasn't looking at the grasses and the plants. I was looking for the animals.
Right.
But now I'm getting to the point where I can recognize some plant species and obviously see what they're browsing and how recent that has been. So I think it's just another one of those things where experience builds on experience.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a nerdy biologist either to know all that background and know the types of grasses and all that stuff. Anybody can look that up, as you pointed out, Bernasconi.
Sure.
There's an app for that.
Yeah, I mean, there are apps for that, but frequently the internet connection to run that app is not where you are. But
yes,
I can't recommend enough. Fish and Game puts on there's the Master Naturalist program.
Yeah,
that is. If you want to really put together that painting, of what's around you, those programs aren't necessarily have the bent to make you a better hunter, but
right.
You will become you will know the language of the landscape that's around you.
Yeah, it makes you well-rounded.
And what it does is that it makes you able to ask better questions,
right.
Because the species that are involved, the natural phenomenons that are going on around you, of various migrations of not only just the mule deer and elk, but the birds that are around you as well. A lot of times, the birds in trees that are around you at a given time of year can give you a pretty good idea of where we're at in terms of coming along in the season and what's available too.
Yeah.
Because some of those guys work like a freaking clock.
Mm-hmm.
The Western tanager.
That's also a thrush? Was Swainson's thrush?
We were joking this past weekend when we were camping. I was really wanting to see a Western tanager. I'd seen one a couple weeks ago, and so I used my Merlin app, and I was like, "Oh, that's got to be." It sounded like a Western tanager. I was like, "That's got to be it." I opened the Merlin app, and it was a Swainson's thrush, and I was like, "Dang it!" And probably an hour later, I go, "Okay, I heard another bird. That's got to be it."
Yeah,
Merlin.
he got so excited
4 or 5 times, and it was always the Swainson's thrush.
Played by the thrush.
Yep.
Hey, Jeff Knetter here, Idaho Fish and Game's Upland Game and Migratory Game Bird Program Coordinator. Back in summer 2024, we launched a project called Turkey Tracker. We aim to learn more about Idaho's turkey populations, and we'd like your help again this year. Turkey Tracker relies solely on folks reporting their turkey sightings. Because we are interested in tracking nesting success and reproduction, those observations of broods during July and August are especially important. So, next time you're out and about and see some wild turkeys, pull out your smartphone and document your sighting. Think of it as Pokemon Go meets birding. Right now is as important as ever to download the free Survey 123 app and get to spotting turkeys. The project has been super successful so far, but we still need your help. Head on over to Idaho Fish and Game's Wild Turkey webpage to learn more.
With 31 game species and over 35 million acres of publicly accessible land, hunting in Idaho is unmatched. Idaho Fish and Game hopes you make this your best season yet and reminds you to do your part and ensure it's a safe, ethical, and enjoyable season for others as well. Be sure to review the seasons and rules before heading out. And if you purchased a big game tag, don't forget to submit your mandatory hunter report. Your first-hand data is the science needed to help manage populations for the future. For tips to plan your hunt, check out GoHuntIdaho.org.
And the other thing I'll say too is that with specificity in terms of the system in which you're wanting to look up, there's a lot of great resources out there. I don't know if we're allowed to plug other podcasts here, but there's if there's a podcast that is based out of where you're looking to hunt, that's probably a great podcast to listen to. Was it the folks over at Exo Mountain have like the Hunt Backcountry podcast? That one's really good. They have a lot. And then also, and in fact, I think they even interview hunters on there that have done like hunts like in specific areas to Idaho or rock slide. They have freaking biologists and researchers on there galore, and they get into amazing topics that know way more than I do about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I've always go ahead.
No, I like that.
Oh, I was always wondering because how I kind of learned to hunt. I didn't grow up hunting. I definitely didn't grow up hunting
Same.
out west. So once I moved out here, it was a huge learning curve. And most of my learning experience came through social formats, right? Podcasts and hunting videos and things of that nature, not sitting down and reading a scientific paper or a book. But I always wondered, like, maybe I should just go to the bookstore and start buying, used biology, or,
Textbooks.
high-level textbooks.
Yeah.
But then I got to thinking, in engineering, we never sat down and read a textbook, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was the same with biology when you were in it.
They're really, so the types of books that I would look at are, they have these, was it like I was working on a chapter on a type of book like this, where it's like a compendium of all the most recent research that we have about a given species. And I was helping out with an opossum one on, I think it was like fur bearers of North America, or wild fur bearers of North America. But those types of books, they will put together all these papers. They have all the citations in the bottom of them. They make a good narrative of as the species, from the ground up, and help you interpret a lot of all the papers together as a collection in terms of what the consensus of research is. And they break it down by, nutrition and, timing of when things are born, or, or they'll look at, mortality rates, or they'll look at whatever, and you'll be able to go through and, there's a lot of great science out there, even if it's older, and we learn stuff new all the time. But even if you can only find like an older used one of those, it will at least give you a really great foundation. I can't recommend stuff like that enough. Yeah.
It's like an Encyclopedia Britannica of
mule deer,
and possums, and
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've inherited some of those books just from being here in the last 3.5 years. You go and talk to, if I'm writing an article or whatever about, winter survival, and I have questions about this, and they're like, well, here's a book that I highly recommend. I mean, those have been really valuable, and it just depends on how deep you want to get with it. Because it's not like we're not all trying to become biologists, but there's a lot of useful information that you can take from just digging into a chapter here and there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because there's tons of books out there. I read one two summers ago after striking out on mule deer for 2 years in a row. I read a book about how to hunt for mule deer, and it was good, but it was not. A lot of it just didn't apply to the places that I am used to seeing, or maybe because I wasn't used to seeing those in 32A or 39 or whatever. And the book was, it's meant to be like a kind of a guidebook for hunting mule deer, but it was written 30 years ago, and it didn't really lay out a lot of those sciencey things. It talked about hypothetical scenarios where a deer will kind of butt and hook around and maybe check its trail and things like that, but it wasn't a lot of practical things that I was seeing. And so I think a lot of those resources you mentioned are they're a little bit more foundational, species specific.
Ooh, yeah. I think so. Especially having your foundation built in a place where it's great to have those family traditions and knowledge about where those basins that your family hunts, and what you know to be true about that species. But then getting that diversity of viewpoints, and then jumping into some of those journals, like it can really open up your mind to just new questions that you might not be asking about mule deer or elk or whatever you're seeing on the landscape.
That's a good lead into a question. What are some of your favorite books that pertain to whether it be hunting, biology, or anything the field that you work in?
Sure. So I'm a notoriously bad reader. I often make fun of myself around my spouse Kai. She loves to read, and she's a really fast reader, and I was not in the fast reader room growing up in school, so I frequently refer to my library of book.
Yeah.
But I'll have one
With
book
the pictures.
I'll have one book that I'm working on and like just picking up every now and then whenever I have like a quiet moment, and then that one gets cycled out and the new book, my library book, comes in. And so right now I'm pulling through Sand County Almanac.
I'm working on that one too right now.
Cute.
Should we start a book club?
Oh, that's a good one. And then I'm going to force me to have good reading habits. And that's a really good example of the language of the landscape.
Yep.
Like the folks, I mean, that book in particular, like it goes through just one specific system, the farm that they're on, and what happens across every single season. And
Yeah, or was that Wisconsin or somewhere that it was?
Yeah.
Yep. So it's and then kind of gets off towards the end, it gets off into individual things around the country. But yeah, that one's a pretty fantastic read. And I've growing, when you're doing your education, Sand County Almanac is one of those books that's like, it's one of like the foundational pieces of literature for the North American model of conservation.
Right.
It is remarkably ahead of its time.
Right.
Yeah.
Considering
But early 30s.
Yep, exactly. For how long ago that book was written.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how comprehensive. I mean, I'm probably halfway maybe through it, but it's already
Tom's a slow reader.
Yeah.
It's not a big book. It's pretty embarrassing for both of us that we
I
are
know.
talking about this thing. And yeah.
How'd you even graduate without reading it?
Man.
Spark notes it.
Yeah, I didn't spark notes it because it was always just like, read this chapter, read this excerpt, because it's not like, you're in your wildlife techniques book, you're not really like, ooh, Sand County Almanac, going to find out like the specifics of hobbling a mule deer.
Right.
But it's a great one to dig into for sure. Yeah, but no, I'd see. Yeah, oddly enough though, like most of my education is not in the Western United States systems,
Right.
and so I've since then, because since coming out here, I've had to learn a lot and very fast and very and that's part of the thing. Why my brain is always churning when I'm out hunting and thinking about these questions is because there's a lot of things that I'm learning on the go, on the job. I have that foundation that's already built as a scientist and a biologist, and that allows me to learn those things in a structured way and pick them up quickly. But sometimes like there are things that I'm picking up on the fly and having to do a lot of this reading more recently than not. So
yeah. I want to kind of segue into some like personal stories, if you guys are cool with that, and start off with what's the longest day you've ever had? And Tom, or both of you guys.
Every day I'm at the computer is the longest day that I've ever had.
I guess let me preface or kind of reword that by saying, what's the longest day that you've ever had in the field? It could be hunting, it could be work related, but I know, Tom, you've had some pretty rough days out gathering collars, and but what are some of the days you just thought would never end out there?
Oh boy. Well, Tom, you go first.
I don't know. I mean, those days, even though they may last, a long time, they don't seem as long, honestly, like as just sitting in the office and, maybe working late one day. I've been pretty fortunate. I haven't had super long days when I'm out for these work trips, like gathering collars and things like that. I'd say, just during hunting season, packing out an elk. I'm 160 pounds sopping wet, so carrying out an elk in a couple trips is not the easiest thing for me. You have some long days there. But yeah, what about you, David?
I am not a person with shame, so I'll give you some good ones. When I was a wolf technician, we had a pack that was up in the Frank Church that we had to hike in to see, and someone gave our crew ambiguous directions, I would say at best. And so instead of it being a 12-mile hike, it turned into a 26-mile day.
Yeah, it's a long day.
And the halfway mark was going in and sampling a wolf rendezvous site. And it was unusually hot. And so I decided to wear my lightweight running shorts as my pant choice of the day. And we hiked all the way in, and ended up hiking in a lot more farther than we thought we had to go. We ran out of water. And so we had to split up. So the people with the water filters went one direction, and the people that were trying to make it to the rendezvous site kept on going. And so we get to the rendezvous site. It's very active. And a rendezvous site typically has the pup stashed somewhere. It's near a source of water so they can put on enough protein quick enough to grow nice and big quickly, because processing protein is water intensive. And I don't get to drink any of the water because I don't have my filter. The filter crew the water crew hasn't shown back up yet, but we are out there scraping like wolf turds in the heat. It's getting to the point where I'm feeling myself starting to like heat stroke or whatever, or heat stress. And then at the same time, because the pups are stashed somewhere nearby, the adults, they never in sight, but I have a pack of wolves barking from the bushes at me as I'm scraping at their turds. And I'm like, I'm almost done, and between each turd, you have to sterilize your tweezers so you don't mix the DNA between your vials. So you're not only scraping turds with tweezers and putting the turd scrapings in vials, but you're also burning poop off of your tweezers all as you're going along there. Yeah. And then, so I'm about to keel over in front of like a bunch of angry wolves, and then we're going to go back out. We're hiking back out when we end up meeting up with the water crew who's at the top of the hill about to come down. I'm like, oh, thanks, but I guess better late than never. And then so we're all hiking out, but the lining on my running shorts tears because they were really old, and I'm pretty cheap with some of my equipment like that.
This is how underwear are left behind in the
back. I know. There's this guy, and suddenly the lining is just digging into me really bad, like really, really bad. And I go, oh my goodness! Like either I'm gonna try and maintain my dignity, and grit it out of here and get cut in half by my shorts and maybe not be able to hike for the rest of the season, or
father children.
Yeah, or. What I ended up doing was Pooh Bearing it out of there. So I said to the crew, I was like,
you Donald ducked it?
All tops, no bottoms.
Donald ducked it out of there. I said to the rest of my awesome crew that I was working with, I said, hey guys, just hike ahead of me, and I'll be behind, a couple bends behind. And
I think HR might want to talk to you after this episode.
Listen, it's very American. Ben Franklin was known for doing wind baths. He would stand at the top of the hills in the buff in the wind. There's a precedent for this. And I wind bathed myself.
You're no founding father.
Oh, not even close. But I wind bathed myself all the way off the mountain.
Yeah.
And right before sunset, I'm hiking down the trail.
You got struck by lightning?
Blowing in the wind. Nope, rattlesnake, middle of the trail. And it was a face-off. And luckily I could get around it, but it was, I didn't end up, we left that morning at 5:30 in the morning. We didn't get back till 11 p.m. at night.
Man, that's a long day.
It was insane.
Maybe it's not wolf crap, but what's the worst thing you've ever smelled on the job?
Oh, probably a necropsy.
Yeah. The necropsies that are in July are the worst.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, that's when you start getting the text message from David. You going to go out on a necropsy for me?
Yeah, exactly. Because what'll happen? Because I had one maybe a year or two ago. It keeled over. It was probably getting up to the mid 90s where it was, and a bear had found it. And bears will just do they'll just do this slop fest. Well, they'll just tear it up into pieces, but pile it all up and just sit on it and chew on it and sit on it and chew on it and then poop around it. And you can imagine all that stuff. And you're going I have to try and figure out if this thing died from a bear or something else. And so you're having to look at each individual piece because it's still kind of fresh. So you can look at some of the bruising and bleeding on each piece, and you're just doing a jigsaw of rotting bear slop. It's
yeah, that was actually kind of going back to asking David what a wildlife biologist does. That's something that I never really thought about, I guess, was kind of putting your detective's hat on when you go out and try to figure out, the cause of death for some of these collared animals. And you really do have to have a lot of attention to detail, right? Yes. And knowledge from, I'm guessing, other kill sites, things to look for.
Yeah. And a lot of it, too, is I can take people out, and this is one of the things I appreciated about you going out, is that when you get to that carcass, number one, you have to be very conscientious about what you're touching and doing as you're moving around it. Cause
it's like a crime scene.
It's a crime scene. Exactly. But the other thing too is that you have to start with zero assumptions.
Right.
And if you walk into that scenario with any assumptions, you will lead yourself potentially in the wrong path. And I've seen a lot of people, they'll walk up onto a dead carcass and go like, oh, that was a wolf. That was a mountain lion. That was a bear. And I'm like, is it? Because we just got here. Let's dig into it.
Yeah, we actually kind of like backtracked where we could tell kind of like this elk calf kind of came from.
Yep.
And we're kind of reading the landscape, seeing, well, it's pretty torn up here. It doesn't look like they were just walking around grazing. It looked like they kind of moved quickly through this. And so we were able to kind of develop some, still probably assumptions. But,
Well, and even tracks, I feel like can't be set, or like, can't be a set in stone thing. Like if you might see some mountain lion tracks circling a mule deer fawn kill, but
doesn't mean that it killed it.
No.
Exactly. I mean, and don't get me wrong, mountain lions kill plenty of mule deer fawns and plenty of elk calves, but I've had stuff where the thing that ended up killing it was the fact that it had, run off of a cliff and broken its neck.
Well, that's kind of this one. We kind of came to the conclusion, I think, that it had gotten tangled up in sort of the yoke of a tree and gotten stuck.
Yep.
How often do you come across that kind of stuff? Because you see that a lot, like on like Nature's Metal and like different like social media sites and stuff where people post. They'll be out shed hunting and find like an elk that's down in this little crevasse that's didn't survive.
Yep.
And it probably went out in a horribly gruesome way. But how often? I mean, I think I kind of assume that when you're going out for a mort signal check, some animal got to it, or maybe it died from the winter. But what are some of the other ways and some of the other methods that animals have croaked that you've come across?
Oh boy. So I've had some. So the hardest ones get into when there's a disease involved, and typically, as soon as an animal starts to get weak from the winter, they become more vulnerable to these diseases on the landscape, and so that's when you're getting into the. Well, I am going to take as thorough notes as I can, have someone take pictures that's not got hands covered in blood, and then get physical samples, and you can tell some diseases or have a pretty good idea of some diseases based on how things interact with the organs and how things might be bleeding or not bleeding or full of fluid or not full of fluid. But, sometimes it comes when it gets to that stuff, it's like, we're sending this off for genetic work and to figure out what's going on here.
We were looking for bruising. We were looking at spots on organs. We were looking at, you were looking for, like, what's it called? Not pathogens, but like bot flies and parasites. Yeah. Things like that.
Yep. And those all can tell a story there. Are there ticks still attached to the carcass or not?
They weren't on that one. What is it called when they were fleeing the carcass?
Yeah, it's like a tick exodus. Because all the ticks just start. And they are jumping onto any host that they think they can get onto next because their bet that they made on that elk did not shake out well, and they're looking to jump ship. And so sometimes you're working up those things, and you just have your knife is going through like a carpet of ticks, and they're trying to crawl up you and stuff like that.
You said there was a term for that, and I can't remember what it was now.
I thought it was
putting you on the spot.
I don't know. Yeah,
be a good trivia question.
Yeah.
Here's another question. What is the most ticks you've ever seen on a deceased animal?
Looking at some of like the some of the moose that I've seen dead that have been absolutely plastered with them.
Yeah.
But most recently, it was just like elk out on, winter range where if winter doesn't get, quite cold enough, you'll start to see a little bit more heavier tick activity. And like, it was one of those things where like, when I walk up into a necropsy on an animal, I am skinning the entire animal out. And as I was going through the neck, it was probably crusted with about like an inch thick mat of ticks that were like on it, and like you're just like, it's like your knife is going through it and you're just seeing like ticks that are just sliced in half, and it's pretty gnarly stuff. But in terms of other things that we're looking for when we're out there, like the most important thing that you can find are the wounds that it got before it died.
Right.
And things don't bruise after they're dead. So like those and where those wounds occur, if you can find that, fantastic.
Yeah.
I love in some ways a mountain lion kill. Because it is so straightforward. Mm-hmm. It is like
bruising around the neck and
crushed bruising around the base of the throat typically. And it is cached in a very unique way. And the way they trim that fur off, then like looks like a razor clipped it. And you get there and you're like, yes, this is going to be, at least I know the primary cause of death. And anything I look at for after this is going to be something that could have been contributing to that.
Yeah.
Like finding that first cause of death is just, sometimes if I walk up and there's just a dead animal just laying there on the ground and nothing else and no bruising, that's when I go like, oh, and I'll text Kaya on my InReach, being like, I'm going to be home late tonight.
Yeah.
Elbow deep in this elk for the whole afternoon.
gosh. Do you guys want to play a quick round of rapid fire and wrap this baby up?
Sure.
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with how this works?
I am
Bernasconi? I'm sure Tom has. You've listened to a few of these before. You know how it goes. But basically, quickly run through as many questions of these as possible without thinking. Just name your answer.
You wanting both of us to answer or just
Yeah, I
Bernie?
do.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let's kick her off. Fly rod or spin rod, David?
Spinner.
I know your answer. Tomothy? Fly rod?
You know, I have a love-hate relationship with...
No, this is rapid fire.
This is
Come on.
rapid fire
Tom.
for the program.
Jeez.
I'd probably go fly rod.
That's right. Would you rather only fish saltwater or freshwater for the rest of your life?
Ooh.
Saltwater.
Ooh.
Saltwater, yeah.
Did you take the elevator or the stairs?
It depends who's in the elevator.
Usually stairs.
Depends who's in the elevator?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Do you take the stairs getting up here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, stairs. What if Brian Pearson's in the elevator?
Oh, I love me, Brian.
Okay.
Peterson.
Fried fish or do you grill them?
Ooh, depends on the type of fish.
I prefer fried, but I grill it at home.
What are your favorite three things to put in a crawdad pot?
Sausage, pineapple.
Pineapple?
Yep, that's a spicy little mix-up that I did this year. And then the last one is...
Do you Old Bay?
No. It's cayenne.
Oh,
You got to
okay.
do it yourself. So I'll just land on cayenne. Yeah.
Tom, do you fry your catfish or bake them?
I like them a nice medium rare.
Oh, God, that's a whole nother story. Would you rather get mauled by a grizzly or shish kebabbed by an elk antler?
Elk antler.
Tom,
Well, by a grizzly, that's a better story, man.
I agree. What was the first animal you guys harvested?
Ooh. Ever?
Yeah.
Coot.
Okay.
Probably a fox squirrel back east.
Yeah.
Yep. I had an Uncle David. Took me out my first time hunting. I was like 12 years old, and the shotgun he had for me broke. And so I was using his 10 gauge. And I shot a coot off the water and fell over. That was my bird for the day.
You eat that coot?
Yeah. That was nice.
Yeah.
Nice. You have 1 week to hunt any game animal in Idaho. Which animal and why?
Ooh.
1 week.
Elk.
Unit 39 elk?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Boise River elk. Yep.
I'd probably go bighorn.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like it. I don't know if we've ever had that.
Never
one.
put in for it, but
Tom, I probably already know this one about you. You're leaving to go on a hunting and fishing trip and you pack your cooler. What kind of sandwich and what kind of drink are you bringing? Don't say queso.
that can be a beverage in the quantities that I eat it.
Yeah, I'll say. Tom brought 2 this past weekend. Two tubs of Albertson's queso.
You know, you gotta be prepared. Sandwich, I'm pretty plain. I'll just go with like a turkey sandwich probably. What kind of drink? You know, iced tea,
Nice tea. Mint tea.
homemade mint tea.
Oh, it's gonna be I always do sausage wrap, and my weekend beverage of choice right now is Kirkland has its own beer brand now that they're doing at the shoots.
Really?
It is so good. It's such a deal too, man. You can't find a 12-pack for $13 these days, but it is good.
And it's like a lager or what kind of
Yeah,
lager? Okay.
I'll have to check that out.
it's great.
Holy smokes. That was the longest rapid fire I think we've ever had.
We were not so rapid.
You get us together and we just go on and on.
Yep.
Well, I think this is the finish line for us.
That's right.
So good.
Great segue.
Great
Tom.
wrap up.
Gosh. Handsome and witty.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, this was fun.
I had
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Gosh.
Good to see you, David.
Likewise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Go
Well,
back out for those callers.
I know. I'll get them next week.
alrighty. Take care, guys.
See ya.
See ya.